You can't rush art. Be it sculpting, painting, music, or dance, if you want the final product to be something truly spectacular, you need to take your time to make sure that you don't miss a detail. Locomotive design is no different, as each component needs to be thoroughly thought through in its shape and placement to ensure that the engine will work. Rushing the process will only lead to trouble, and that's exactly what the Central Pacific Railroad got when it was trying to go for a world record. By the 1880s, the railroads of America were developing fast. The old 440s of the Civil War were being replaced with 10-wheel 460s, and even these were starting to struggle with the ever-increasing workloads. Naturally, a 480 locomotive was the next logical step in engine design. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad had attempted to build such an engine in 1855, but technological limitations meant the design never caught on. By the 1880s, the Central Pacific Railroad decided to have a go themselves and tasked master mechanic Andrew Jackson Stevens with creating a 480 that could cope with the railroad's growing traffic. Stevens went away to the Central Pacific's workshop in Sacramento and in 1882 produced engine number 229. While on the surface it may have looked like any other Central Pacific engine, on the inside it had a special sloped firebox and each cylinder had 4 slide valves. 2 for controlling cutoff and another 2 which were controlled by Stephenson valve gear, but only used when reversing. Despite the unusual layout and losing its funnel in an accident, the engine proved to be a reliable steamer, not only outperforming many of the 440s and 460s that it was trialled against, but also becoming the first successful 480 locomotive in the world, as well as gaining the record for world's heaviest engine too. The 12-wheeler was given the nickname Mastodon, and the Central Pacific, pleased with its performance, sent it, along with its blueprints and the team who built it, to the Cook Locomotive and Machine Works in New Jersey, requesting they build 20 more. With such a bold, brilliant and successful record-holding engine on their hands, it seems that the railroad's management were keen for more, specifically Leland Stanford. Not long after Mastodon was completed, Stanford, seemingly determined to keep the record-breaking going, ordered the Sacramento Works to build an even bigger engine, supposedly for working heavy freight trains around San Joaquin Valley. What's strange, however, is he didn't inform any other managers of his decision to build the engine. Upon a visit to the works, Charles Crocker saw the engine under construction, and when told the team was building the world's largest engine, he immediately halted all work on the project. Stanford in turn countermanded the order and demanded work continue, seemingly determined to get this bigger engine built as soon as possible. Whenever Stevens, who was in charge of the project, figured out a design for a component, Stanford immediately approved it and had it built and installed in the engine without taking time to properly evaluate or test it. This dedication to getting the engine completed resulted in some inadvisable decisions being made during its construction, such as fitting the engine with an experimental valve gear of Stevens' own design and casting the frames as separate sections since they were too big to cast as one piece. Eventually, the locomotive was completed in 1883 and unveiled to the public carrying the name El Gobernador. Not only was it the largest locomotive in the world at the time, but possibly the first 410 ever built. Its impressive size made it an amazing tool for publicity, spending the first year of its life hanging around the Central Pacific's passenger depot where it would drive by passenger trains pulling a long line of empty freight cars. It would then be parked close to the depot so passengers could get a better look at it. Eventually, it was moved to the San Joaquin Valley as intended in 1884, but problems with the engine's design very quickly arose. To start with, El Gobernador had to be transported to San Joaquin in pieces, as the engine was too heavy to traverse various bridges on the journey there. Despite the second and third driving wheels being blind as well as the front and rear drivers having some transverse play, its length was also impractical compared to the other engines in use. Stevens' valve gear was met with some praise, but all of that was negated by the issues caused by the locomotive's cylinders, which were far too big for the boiler to meet their demand, and it was found that the rotary valves weren't working properly. As a result, a new set of cylinders was cast and Stevens' valve gear was replaced with the more traditional Stephenson design instead. But worst of all was the boiler and firebox. Because of the amount of steam the cylinders used combined with the small firebox, it was very difficult for the boiler to maintain pressure. Firing the engine was so bad that one fireman supposedly commented that, quote, "A hell couldn't keep steam up in that engine." In 1885, El Gobernador was rebuilt and modified to rectify some of its issues, and crews even tried burning coal instead of wood to boost performance, but it seems that the improvements were moderate at best. With expectations soured, the engine was less El Gobernador and more un gran fracaso, and in 1894, after only 10 years of service, it was finally withdrawn and scrapped. Interestingly enough, the engine might not entirely be gone, as the boiler was used to power stationary engines in the Sacramento workshop. The boiler was later buried in the river embankment near the engine shops in 1905, and has remained there ever since. Though given it's been buried in a river embankment for over 100 years, it's probably not in the best condition. Given that years later, 410 locomotive designs have been proven to work, and with American railroads building much bigger and more complex engines, it's safe to say that El Gobernador's problems had little to do with its size. Whoever you want to blame, be it Stevens for being too experimental or Stanford for hurrying the build, let El Gobernador be a lesson that some things, no matter how big or small, need to be taken slowly in order to do them properly, and that often more than not, rush leads to ruin. Subscribe for more.